Okay, welcome everybody. For those who are joining us, we'll just give it another minute or so as we get started. But as we do begin, I will just say if you would like to access interpretation today, we do have Pat who will be interpreting for us. So you can click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and you can select the language of your choice.
Nous avons de l'interprétation aujourd'hui. Si vous avez besoin de l'utiliser, vous pouvez cliquer sur l'icône du globe dans votre barre d'outils en bas de l'écran et sélectionner le français.
Thanks, Age. Welcome, everyone. I see a few more folks trickling in. Good morning. We'll just give it another minute before we jump in and get started. Okay. We do have a pretty packed agenda this morning, so we will jump in, but that's no problem if folks are able to join late. That's all good. So again, welcome to our funding discussion this morning. We're going to be discussing two FCM funding opportunities: growing Canada's community canopies, GCCC, and adaptation in action. So again, if you did not hear me the first time or weren't on yet, we do have interpretation today. So you can click on the globe icon to choose your language that you would like to listen in. And thank you, Pat, for interpreting for us this morning. So to begin, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Climb Atlantic operates in Atlantic Canada, which is on the unceded and unsurrendered homelands of multiple Indigenous peoples, including the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and Abenaki, all members of the Wabanaki Confederacy, as well as the Beothuk, Innu, and Inuit. So as we move through our funding discussion this morning, just taking a moment to reflect on the lands in which we work and operate in. And if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat, we would love to hear where you're joining us from this morning as well. Next up, we have our agenda. So what we will be doing this morning, what we're going to be chatting about. I will shortly pass it over to my colleague Trevor to give a little bit of background on this session, why we're here today. And then we have Charlene here with us from the FCM to talk a little bit more about GCCC and AIA. And go into a little bit more depth of those programs to learn a little bit more. And you're welcome to ask Charlene questions as we go through that portion. And as we have her expertise in the room, it's a great opportunity to really dive in and ask some questions about those programs. And then we'll have 2 rounds of breakouts. And our breakout rooms, there'll be a variety of different topics that we'll describe and go over when that time comes. And then around 11:45, we'll have some more opportunity for questions and a wrap up. We'll wrap up by noon. Before I pass it over to Trevor, I also just wanted to lay the groundwork of some community guidelines, some reminders as we are in this virtual space together this morning. So a few community guidelines to keep in mind as we go through our presentations and our breakout rooms are to be respectful and respect others' ideas in this space. We're all here to learn. And you're welcome to participate to the level you feel comfortable. If that is keeping your camera off and just listening in, that's awesome. If it is a space that you really want to engage in and ask questions and participate, that's wonderful too. So just making sure that you're participating to the level that you feel comfortable in. Please take what you need throughout this call. It's a 2-hour call, so if you need to take a break, a bio break, grab some water, whatever you need, please feel free to do that and turn your camera off and take what you need. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was just where possible being open to collaboration in this space as we talk about different funding opportunities, perhaps potential applications for funding that you're working on, being open to others' ideas and potential collaborations across Atlantic Canada. So that is the community guidelines, the groundwork that we wanted to lay as we begin this call and begin our discussions around these funding opportunities. So I will pass it off to my colleague Trevor to provide a little bit more background.
Thanks, Anna. So participation in this workshop today it's meant to be low barrier and free of charge thanks to funding from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Climate Atlantic's project is one of 13 funded across Atlantic Canada through the adaptation stream. And we're one of 6 partner organizations funded through this adaptation stream provided through FCM. So Climate Atlantic is here to support not only municipalities and communities, but organizations throughout Atlantic Canada, including nonprofits and NGOs, or just an individual that needs to know where to start with free and accessible adaptation information. The services that we can provide, we provide a number of services, not only that support municipalities and communities, nonprofits, NGOs, as well as just residents across Atlantic Canada. These services can range from submitting a question to our help desk to having a one-on-one with one of our provincial specialists. We have programs as well, including, you might have heard of CART, that will be launching in the fall. We can also leverage any one of our collaborators and delivery partner agencies, which are numerous across Atlantic Canada. So we all know that accessing reliable, dedicated, and long-term funding for adaptation is crucial. That's why we're here today. Last week was the first session in our series where we had a funding workshop. In that session, we provided support for identifying and navigating third-party funding and had examples of how to leverage partners and services to submit your application when the time comes. This week, we'll be discussing specific funding from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities through the Green Municipal Fund. Starlene from FCM will be presenting, and we'll cover the details of Greening Canada's community canopies. So it's a mouthful, GCCC, initiative and adaptation and action funding streams, as well as providing opportunities to ask questions about your application. Later, there will be opportunities to learn about key topics to consider when designing a project and applying, or which could inspire a project if you aren't sure where to start. Also a reminder that the funder will leave after the Q&A portion of their presentation. So if you have specific questions for the funder, that would be the time to ask those questions. However, if you think of questions later, we can always submit them to the funder, or you can always book a meeting with an FCM advisor yourself. So now I'll turn it over to Charlene.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction, Trevor. So, as Trevor was saying, I work for the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, specifically on our climate adaptation project, which is called LLCA, Local Leadership in Climate Adaptation. And also GCCC, yes, it is a mouthful, Growing Canada's Community Canopies. So basically our adaptation projects and tree planting projects. So as was mentioned, I'll be here for the Q&A period right after this presentation. And then afterwards, you are more than welcome to book a meeting with me or send me emails. I will put both my email and my booking link in the chat. So just a little overview on what is the GMF. So the Green Municipal Fund is a branch of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. It is an endowment of $2.4 billion. And what is really interesting is that, yes, we are a funder. We have a blended mix of grants and loans, but for the adaptation and the tree planting, it is uniquely grants. So that is very exciting for you. But we have a whole slew of other programs specifically on the mitigation side of things. So electrification of municipal fleets, solar farms or other alternative energy farms, net zero transformation, so social closed loop cycles. We have sustainable, affordable housing. So essentially, if you have a green project and you would like to figure out how to make it possible, please send me an email or one of the GMF representatives, and we will talk you through what is possible. So, yes, we are a funder, but what is our secret sauce, as we like to say, is our capacity building, our capacity development. So, as Trevor was mentioning, the series that you're assisting today, that is part of the capacity development that GMF finds really important, not just providing money, but also assisting municipalities to get to where they want to be in their projects. So yeah, feel free to check out our website. We also have a lot of different resources. We have an adaptation library and a platform also for the trees, various resources in assisting your projects. So, as I was saying, we have a lot of different offers in terms of adaptation at the Green Municipal Fund. And this is a little snapshot to show how they're all interrelated. So today I will not be talking about our program Climate Ready Plans and Processes, but this is just dropping a hint that this program exists. So this is really looking at a municipality in its whole and planning for adaptation projects, looking at climate risks and climate hazards, and really just an overarching high scale view. What we're going to be talking about today are the two other programs listed here, Adaptation in Action, which is we're really putting the shovel in the soil. We are getting our hands dirty, and we are doing concrete projects that have specific repercussions on the ground. So this is to mitigate various issues. For example, if you have flooding problems, then it might be putting in that dike, it might be putting in that culvert, so concrete actions. And then on the right here, we have Growing Canada's Community Canopies, which is another adaptation project, tree planting throughout the city to counter the heat island effect. So this is just showing how all these programs are intertwined. So a closer snapshot for Adaptation in Action, we have two different streams for this program. We have a feasibility study and then also the implementation project. So we can think of this as a three-step process. So I was mentioning before that we have the CRPP, the plans and processes. So in order to submit a feasibility study, you need to first have an adaptation plan or a risk assessment. And then to submit an implementation project, you must first have a feasibility study. So we can look at this as three different steps to get you to your goal of an implementation project. You by no means have to go through us to do the adaptation plan or to do the feasibility study, but these are various steps in order to help you on that journey. So the feasibility study, what is that? Well, it's really, I like to say that it's the recipe of rolling out your implementation project. So, what should be included in your feasibility study is that there should be the project objectives and site. So, the why are you doing this? How are you going to do this? The technical feasibility. So, the plans, if need be, on how to accomplish your project. We need a cost estimate, we need a budget. So, we really need all the steps going forward to then, when you get to your implementation project, it'll just be to roll out the project. So as I was saying, we offer funding for both the feasibility study and also the implementation project. And these are two different application processes. So within your feasibility study, there's various considerations. For us, it's really important to include AREI, as we call it, so anti-racism, equity, and inclusion within your adaptation plan, but then also your subsequent feasibility studies and implementation projects. We have a whole section on our website in our capacity development talking about why AREI. And in a nutshell, AREI is very important in considering all populations on your territory, making sure that if we want to make sure that in order to have a resilient community, we need to make sure that all populations are considered. So in this portion, we want you to analyze which voices are being heard when you're doing your plan or your feasibility study. Who is being affected by this project? Have you talked to them? Are their voices being heard? Just really doing a whole 360 on who is being impacted by this. It's another important consideration is nature positive adaptation. So integrating nature positive solutions when possible. For example, a saltwater marsh or integrating, if you have erosion, including plantings. So really looking at nature positive solutions for your adaptation problem. So I'm going to include some examples of what is possible. The scope is very large. And what's really important for us is that in your community, you analyze what are the issues in terms of climate adaptation and how these can be mitigated. So as I was saying, an adaptation plan or a risk assessment is a prerequisite for your feasibility study and your implementation project. And what we will be doing is drawing a direct correlation between this adaptation plan or risk assessment to your implementation project. So we need to see that there's a cause and effect. Problem, flooding, that has been identified in your plan or risk assessment, and then the project that you're suggesting is mitigating those effects. So some types of eligible projects, and this is by no means exhaustive. We have wetland restoration or construction. We have public cooling and warming infrastructure. We have the installation of retrofitting and upgrading green infrastructure. One thing that I would like to point out is that maintenance is not allowed in this, is not a permissible activity. Neither is the purchase of land in this funding. But so those are so maintenance. If you have a problem, let's say in your dike, fixing that will not be eligible. However, upgrading in order to put in adaptation implications, that is eligible. So to get the wheels turning on what potential projects you could have in your community, we wanted to highlight some various projects from Atlantic Canada that were approved in the last round. After this call, or after this presentation, I will put in the chat, we have a press release that was released in February with a list of all the projects that were approved for adaptation and action. So I can include those so you can have a better view holistically across Canada. However, for the Atlantic provinces, for feasibility studies, we had a project from Hampton, New Brunswick for assessing flood adaptation solutions. For Mahone Bay, we had options for stormwater management. The feasibility studies has a maximum of $70,000, whereas adaptation in action, the implementation projects are up to $1 million. So we have the town of Pictou was awarded almost $800,000 for adapting to coastal flooding. Annapolis Royal had the shoreline restoration. And Stratford was allocated almost $600,000 for implementing backup power to critical sewage lift stations. So just some ideas for you as you explore this possible funding stream. What is important is that the amount of projects that you're eligible for is indexed to your population size. So for populations under 50,000, you can have one feasibility study and one implementation project. Between 50,000 and 500, you have two. Above 500, you have 3. For the cost sharing for feasibility studies, as I was saying, you have up to $70,000. The minimum you could receive would be 80%, and there's 10 additional percent based on your population size if you're less than 10,000, and another 10% if you engage in collaboration, specifically with Indigenous communities or neighboring communities. And then for the implementation project, you have up to $1 million, and the maximum project cost is $1 million. You cannot go over because then it will, DMAF will be the, it's another federal program that you could apply to. So maximum $1 million. The baseline you could get is 60%, and it can go up to 100% depending on various variables, which you see in this slide here. So 10% extra if your population is below 10,000, 10% if you meaningfully address AREI, 10% if you have collaboration, and 10% if you have nature positive adaptation. So the feasibility studies are now open to mid-October. Implementation projects, we have a first call until mid-August and then a second call until October. So if you have any questions, you can book a call with a representative, and we would be happy to assist you in your projects. Now for growing Canada's community canopies. So for this program, we have 2 funding streams. We have the tree planting funding and also the strategic grants funding. And once again, I was talking about our secret sauce, our capacity development. So we offer this via Tree Canada. So you can talk to a tree specialist. Not only are they an urban tree specialist, but they are also a specialist on our program. So even if you have a specialist in your municipality, I would suggest talking to them. It's a service free of charge in order to both look at your planting plans, in order to look at your application in terms of the urban forestry aspects. Kinds of projects that are eligible. We have street plantings, we have urban plantings, we have park plantings, riparian, and also forest restoration. It's really important that this is all within a municipal context, so within the bounds of the city. So for growing Canada's community canopies, you're allotted up to 50% of eligible costs. Each municipality can have up to $10 million. So therefore the projects would be $20 million. Because as I was saying, it's a 50% cost share. There's a maximum of $1 million for infrastructure costs. So approximately 10% of the amount could be for infrastructure. So what this means is ripping up sidewalks, various infrastructures such as silva cells. So all the infrastructure in order to make sure you have a successful planting. You are also able to match these costs. So I said 50% cost. So you can match them if you find a funding source that is not from 2 billion trees. So we are funded via the program 2 billion trees. So if you found matching funding from them, would not be eligible as it is the same program. So what is important in your application for the planting plan is to have a site selected. We need an analysis of that site, the stock selection, species selection, your planting design, planting techniques, soil preparation. So we really need to know in your planting plan everything from A to Z, much like a feasibility study, as I was talking about in the adaptation portion. So we recognize that everyone has various access to urban forestry expertise. And so, as I was saying, our capacity development is very important in order to ensure successful projects and to increase impact. So, as I was saying, we offer coaching with Tree Canada. So they are experts, as I was saying, both in urban forestry, but also in our programs. So this is, as I said, a free service. process in order to get your application or your planting plan to a place that it can be submitted via our program. As I was also saying, both for adaptation and for growing Canada's community canopies, we have various fact sheets on various resources in terms of tree planting and climate adaptation. So if you're interested, you can scan this QR code in order to find out more about that. But you can also visit our website in order to see those fact sheets. Process for application takes approximately 6 months for adaptation and up to 8 months for the tree planting. So the first portion is talking to a representative, aka myself, or some of my other colleagues, and we scope out the project, make sure that it is eligible, or we cannot determine eligibility, but point you towards eligibility. Then you will do a pre-application, and then you are invited to do a full app via our new portal. So if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to email us. This is the generic email. I will include my email in the chat. And I'd also invite you to sign up for our newsletter, FCM Connect, because you can get all the information for all our funding. As I was saying, we have many different streams, both in mitigation and adaptation. So I'd invite you to sign up for our newsletter so you get any information regarding that. If you'd like to speak to an advisor, you can scan this QR code and book a meeting that way. And I will also be including my personal booking link in the chat. So this is my email. So you are more than welcome to email me via this. But as I said, I will also be including it in the chat. And now we have a brief period of questions. We'll just open up the chat here to see if there's any questions, or you're more than welcome to unmic yourself and ask them directly. So Adrian wrote, can the purchase of property be used as a part of the contribution from a community towards the project costs? So we're talking, I'm assuming you're talking about adaptation, Adrian, the adaptation project. So can the purchase of property be used as a part contribution from a community towards the project costs? I believe so. I believe so. I will maybe double check, but one thing that I would wonder is that the purchase of a property tends to be quite expensive, and the budget itself cannot supersede $1 million. So I wonder, and because the percentages that you could accrue could be quite high, as I was saying, for adaptation and action, it can go up to 100%. So I wonder if it would be beneficial to include it. I think it would really depend. A lot of people find it difficult to stick within that 1 million. And I'm not sure how much land costs in Atlantic provinces, but out here in Montreal is quite expensive. So anyway, that's one thing I would check, but I can get back to you, Adrian, more specifically on that.
Is there a
Maria has
question?
written.
Yeah.
Sorry, Trevor?
Oh, you got it, Maria.
Perfect. So Maria said, just double checking that a feasibility study needs to be conducted before an implementation project. Absolutely, Maria, you've got it. And the feasibility study does not need to be done by us. It can be done internally. I had talked about the various components of a feasibility study. So the what, why, where, how, budget. If you're able to do that internally or by another means, that's great. We just need all that documentation for an implementation project. And Suffer over here has written, what is the acceptable margin of error for cost estimates in a feasibility study phase? Interesting question. So essentially what you're saying is, let's say you submitted a budget for $500,000, and then when you get to implementation, it actually costs a whole lot more. I'm actually not sure of that one, Suffer. I'm going to write it down and I will get back to you on that one. And by get back to you, I will message it to Anna and then I'll get back to you via that. And I'll also just take down your question here, Adrian. Perfect. Matt here has written follow-up to Adrian's question. Can the 1 million be applied to a larger project, stacking as a lower percent? Okay, so it has to be a standalone project. So basically we have to demonstrate that it is their project as a total with a cost below $1 million is contributing to resiliency and adaptation in your community. So if, Matt, you have a standalone project that does all that and is under $1 million, that is great. It can be part of a larger project. For example, there's one project that they want to do a series of wetlands, but with the budget offered, they're only able to do several of those, but those wetlands themselves are contributing to the resiliency in terms of adaptation in their community. So it can be part of a larger project, but their projects that they are submitting are standalone and are able to counter the effects of adaptation on their own. So that is what's really important within that. Hillary here has written for the GCCC, can rural communities utilize this program as well? Yes, so all municipalities, if you're a municipality on the CRA, you can apply. What I mean by that is that it cannot be plantings in a like out of a city context. For example, it cannot be let's say you have harvested some trees, it cannot be a replanting in a region outside, but within a municipal context in your municipality, rural and urban can apply to GCCC. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. I don't see any here in the chat, but oh, I think Adrian just wrote another. Can funds be leveraged from GCCC to cover tree planting costs as part of AIA? Interesting, Adrian. That's actually something I forgot to talk about. So there is a joint application between LLCA or AIA Adaptation Action and GCCC. You can do a joint application. So for example, if you're having a flooding river and you want to plant along the shoreline, you can do this joint application. So that is possible. And what you wrote here, can funds be leveraged from GCCC to cover tree plantings? Yes. So as I was saying, joint application, that is permissible. Do we have any other questions regarding these two offers?
It doesn't look like it.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, I'm going to stick my email in the chat and my booking link, and feel free to reach out with any questions you might have for either of these two programs.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Charlene, for that. And yeah, I highly recommend all those resources that you mentioned, booking with an advisor, the coaching services that are available for your GCCC application, all really good points that you brought out there.